Coach Thompson slapped the clipboard down hard against the steel locker next to my head. The crack echoed through the empty room, a sharp, violent sound that cut through the familiar scent of sweat and disinfectant. "Marcus, you're benched." He said it flatly, without preamble, his eyes fixed on some point over my shoulder. "Tyler's starting point guard for the state championship." The gym's ancient fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, a swarm of angry, electric wasps trapped in glass. For a moment, I was sure I'd misheard him, that this was some kind of bizarre, last-minute mind game. "What are you talking about, Coach?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "The game. It's tonight." He finally met my gaze, and there was nothing there. No empathy, no regret, just a chilling finality. "I know when the game is," he said, his voice as cold as the concrete floor. "My decision is final." My hands began to shake, an uncontrollable tremor that started in my fingers and radiated up my arms. I stared down at my jersey, the royal blue and gold number 12, crumpled on the bench where I'd left it. It seemed like a lifetime of work was pooled in that heap of fabric. 3 years of perfect attendance, never missing a single practice, not even when I had the flu so bad I could barely stand. I was the first one in the gym every morning and the last one to leave. Team captain for 2 seasons. I'd poured everything I had into this team, into this dream, carrying us through the playoffs with an 18.5 points per game average. I'd earned my place. The injustice of it was a physical blow, knocking the wind out of my lungs and leaving a sour, metallic taste in my mouth. I felt the heat rise in my face, a flush of shame and fury. "My replacement is Tyler?" I finally managed to say, the name feeling foreign and absurd on my tongue. "This is about him being your nephew, isn't it?" I looked from the crumpled jersey to the coach's impassive face. "The championship game is in 6 hours, Coach. 6 hours. And you're putting the ball in the hands of a guy who shoots 40% from the free throw line on a good day. He panics under pressure. You know that. We've all seen it. You're going to throw away the state title for him?" The accusation hung in the stale air between us. For a second, a flicker of something, guilt maybe, crossed his face before being extinguished. "Tyler has been working hard," he said, the excuse sounding weak even to him. "He just needs a chance to prove himself in a high-pressure situation." "A chance?" I shot back, my voice rising. "I earned my spot. I earned it in every drill, every scrimmage, every single game for 3 years. This isn't a charity case, it's the championship." He took a step closer, invading my space, his shadow falling over me. His voice dropped to a low, menacing tone. "The decision is made. You need to decide if you're a part of this team or not." He stared at me for a long moment, waiting, daring me to argue further. When I just stood there, speechless and trembling with rage, he seemed to take it as submission. He nodded once, a sharp, dismissive gesture, and turned his back on me. The sight of his retreating back was somehow more infuriating than the benching itself. "The award ceremony's at 8 tonight," he called out, not even bothering to look over his shoulder as he walked out of the locker room. The door swung shut behind him with a soft pneumatic hiss. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be." Left alone, the buzz of the lights seemed to grow louder, counting down the seconds. Harder than it needed to be? He had no idea how hard I was about to make it for him. For a few minutes, I just stood there in the echoing silence of the locker room, letting his words sink in. The fury didn't fade, but it cooled, hardening from a wildfire into a solid block of ice in my gut. He thought he could just dismiss me, discard 3 years of my life like a piece of trash, and I would just take it. He thought I would sit quietly on that bench and watch his unqualified nephew fumble away our one shot at a title. He was wrong. My shaking hand stilled as I pulled out my phone, my movements now precise and deliberate. I scrolled out through my contacts, past my mom, past my teammates, and landed on the name I was looking for, Mike Chow, the sports reporter for the local paper who had been covering our team all season. He'd interviewed me half a dozen times. He knew my stats, he knew the team, and most importantly, he had a big local following. My thumb hovered over the call button. This was it, the point of no return. I pressed it. He answered on the second ring. "Chow, sports desk." "Mike, it's Marcus Williams." Marcus, hey man, getting mentally prepped for the big game tonight? Northwood's defense is tough, but my money's on you. The casual confidence in his voice was like a punch to the stomach. That's actually why I'm calling, I said, my own voice steady and cold. There's been a change in the starting lineup. I figured you might want the scoop before tip-off. There was a pause on the other end. The sound of a keyboard clacking stopped. Oh yeah? Who's out? I am, I said. Coach benched me. The silence that followed was more eloquent than any question. You've got to be kidding me, Mike finally said. You're the MVP of this league. Who's he putting in? I let the silence hang for a beat before delivering the payload. His nephew, Tyler Thompson. I heard a low whistle on the other end. Mike, I've got a story about nepotism that'll break before tip-off, and I have the stats to back it up. Send me everything you have, Marcus, Mike said, his voice all business now. I'll have this online in 20 minutes. I walked out of the gym and into the pale, late afternoon sunlight, feeling strangely calm. The decision was made, the dominoes were falling, and I could only wait to see where they landed. I was halfway across the student parking lot when I heard his voice, sharp and angry, cut through the quiet. Marcus! I turned. Coach Thompson was striding toward me, his face flushed and his fists clenched. He must have seen me through his office window. What did you just do? He demanded, getting right in my face. Who were you on the phone with? Just getting a second opinion on your coaching strategy, I said, refusing to back down. His eyes narrowed into slits. You're making a mistake, Marcus, he hissed, his voice low and venomous. A career-ending mistake. You need to think about your future. Think about your college recommendations. He leaned in closer, his breath smelling like stale coffee. I know people. I know coaches at every level. I can make a few calls, paint a picture of a player with a bad attitude. A kid who's a cancer in the locker room. You think any D1 program will want to touch you after I'm done? You'll be lucky to play at a community college. You need to call that reporter back right now and kill the story. The threat hung in the air, thick and ugly. A few months ago, it would have terrified me into silence. The thought of losing my shot at a scholarship, of everything I'd worked for turning to dust, would have been my worst nightmare. But he'd already taken my dream and tried to break it. What more could I lose? I looked him dead in the eye, the fear replaced by a cold, hard resolve. No, I said. The single word seemed to stun him more than any outburst would have. You're right, Coach. We should both be thinking about our reputations. So while you're making your calls, you should think about yours when everyone knows Tyler averages 4 turnovers a game. Think about what happens when that reporter pulls up the game film from the semifinals, the one where Tyler choked and airballed 2 free throws in the final minute. You remember that, right? I had to steal the inbounds pass and score with 2 seconds left just to save us. I took a step forward, forcing him to take one back. When this story breaks, you won't just lose this game, you'll lose your job. They won't let a man who sacrifices a state championship for his family politics coach a high school team ever again. His face went from red to a pale, blotchy white. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Just then, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. It was a notification from Mike Chow's social media feed. I turned the screen so Coach Thompson could see it. A photo of me from our last game was at the top under a bold headline. Breaking, shocking last-minute lineup change for state championship. Star point guard Marcus Williams benched. Below the text, a hashtag was already picking up speed. #benchgate. As we stood there in the silent parking lot, my phone began to buzz incessantly. Notifications flooded the screen. Retweets, comments, texts from teammates demanding to know what was going on. Then I heard it, a faint but distinct sound carrying from the main school building, the frantic, incessant ringing of the office telephones. It was the sound of alumni, parents, and the local community flooding the school's phone lines demanding answers. I looked up from my screen and met the coach's horrified gaze. Looks like your phone calls will have to wait, I said. The principal is going to be very busy. The storm I had unleashed on social media led me here, to the quiet, dignified confines of Principal Davis's office. The chaotic ringing of phones and buzzing of notifications faded away, replaced by a heavy, upholstered silence. Unlike the harsh, buzzing fluorescence of the locker room, her office was lit by the warm, gentle glow of desk lamps that cast long shadows across the mahogany furniture and shelves of academic-looking books. It was a room designed to calm nerves and encourage reason, but today it felt like a courtroom. I sat in a stiff leather chair that smelled of old polish, and across the vast expanse of the desk sat Coach Thompson. He wasn't alone. Next to him was a man in a perfectly tailored gray suit with a razor-sharp part in his hair and a thin, condescending smile. He placed a sleek leather briefcase on his lap. A lawyer. The sight of him sent a fresh jolt of ice through my veins. This wasn't just about a game anymore. Principal Davis, a woman whose calm demeanor was legendary, sat between us, her hands folded neatly on her desk. "I've muted the phones for now," she said, her voice even but laced with an unmistakable seriousness. "I've seen the posts, Marcus. I've seen the hashtag. And I've spoken to a dozen furious parents and alumni in the last hour. So, I want to hear exactly what is going on. Coach Thompson, you have the floor." "Thank you, Principal Davis," the coach began, his tone dripping with a rehearsed, sorrowful gravity. He leaned forward, ignoring me completely and focused only on her. "Believe me, the last thing I ever wanted was for this to become a public spectacle." He slid a thin file folder across the polished surface of the desk. It stopped directly in front of her. "The truth is, I was trying to protect Marcus." He finally glanced at me, his expression a mask of phony paternal disappointment. "Marcus has been academically ineligible to play for 2 weeks." The lawyer nodded slowly, as if confirming a profound and painful truth. Coach tapped a manicured finger on the folder. "His grades, specifically in biology, have fallen below the district's requirement for student athletes. I was keeping it quiet, giving him a chance to pull the grade up before the official eligibility check next week. I didn't want to see him face that kind of embarrassment. Benching him tonight? It wasn't a choice. It was my obligation as a coach to follow the rules. It seems that in his panic, instead of taking responsibility, he invented this story about my nephew to deflect from his own failings. "That's impossible," I blurted out, the words catching in my throat. My heart hammered against my ribs. "That's a lie." I looked at Principal Davis, my mind racing to disprove the insanity of his claim. "I maintain a 3.8 GPA. I've never had a grade lower than a BS in my entire life. I'm not ineligible." My hands trembled as she opened the folder and turned the top page towards me. It was an official school grade report, my name and student ID printed at the top. I scanned the list of classes: English, A History, A Pre-Calculus, B+, and then I saw it. Biology, F. The letter was a grotesque red mark on an otherwise clean record, an impossible stain. My breath hitched. "No," I whispered, shaking my head as I stared at the paper. It looked so real, so official. "No, that's not right. I have an A in biology. I just aced Mrs. Davison's last midterm. This is forged. It has to be." My voice cracked with a desperation that I knew, even then, made me sound guilty. I looked at the coach, and he was watching me with a look of cold, calculated victory. He had planned this. This was his checkmate. The lawyer cleared his throat softly, a dry, rasping sound. "The documents are directly from the school's digital record system, Principal Davis," he said, his voice smooth as silk and just as slippery. "Printed less than an hour ago. You can verify the login credentials and timestamps yourself." He steepled his fingers, looking at me with faux pity. "Furthermore, Mr. Rodriguez, the biology teacher will of course verify these records. He is the one who entered the grade after all." The name hit me like a physical blow. Mr. Rodriguez. He had taken over the class 3 weeks ago after Mrs. Davison went on maternity leave. He was the coach's close friend. They golfed together every Saturday. The pieces slammed together in my mind, forming a picture so ugly and corrupt it made me sick. The lawyer continued, his tone shifting to one of mild condescension. "Frankly, we are all very disappointed that it has come to this. Perhaps Marcus should focus on the very real damage he is doing to his academic standing and personal reputation, instead of compounding his problems with baseless and slanderous accusations on the internet. The room fell silent. The lawyer leaned back in his chair, his work done. Coach Thompson looked vindicated, a wronged man who had been forced to reveal a painful truth. My own words of denial felt flimsy and useless against the weight of the forged document and the testimony of a compromised teacher. My future was crumbling in front of my eyes, a structure I had spent years building now being demolished in a matter of minutes by their lies. My mind was a blank wall of static. There was nothing I could say. It was my word against a piece of paper, a teacher, and a coach with a lawyer. All eyes turned to Principal Davis. She hadn't spoken a word since the accusation was made. She simply listened, her expression unreadable. She picked up a heavy ceramic coffee mug, a gift from the class of '08, and held it in both hands. Then, with her fingernail, she began to tap. A slow, rhythmic, maddeningly steady sound that cut through the suffocating tension in the room. Tap, tap, tap. It was the only sound in the world. It was the tick of a clock counting down my chances, the steady beat of a drum at an execution. My execution. The tapping of Principal Davis's pen was the only sound in the universe. Tap, tap, tap. Each crisp little impact on the ceramic mug chipped away at my composure, a slow, methodical demolition of my last ounce of hope. I stared at the forged grade report, at that glaring red F, and felt a profound and terrifying sense of powerlessness. This was how it ended. Not with a missed shot or a loss on the court, but here in a quiet office, drowned by a lie so perfectly constructed that the truth itself sounded like a desperate fantasy. My throat was tight, my hands were slick with sweat, and I was just about to open my mouth to say something, anything, to plead, to scream, to resign myself to my fate, when the heavy office door burst open with such force that it slammed against the wall with a resounding crash. A whirlwind of frantic energy and flying hair blew into the room. It was Jada, my lab partner from biology, her chest heaving as she leaned against the doorframe, her laptop clutched to her chest like a life raft. "I am so sorry, Principal Davis," she gasped, trying to catch her breath. "But you have to see this." The lawyer shot to his feet, his composure finally cracking. "This is a confidential meeting. Principal security should remove this student immediately." But Jada ignored him, her wide, intelligent eyes locking onto mine. "Marcus, yesterday, the library after school. You helped me with the biology homework, right? On cellular respiration?" I could only nod, completely bewildered. "What does that have to do with anything, Jada?" I asked, my voice hoarse. She took a few steps into the room, holding the laptop out like an offering. "I screen recorded it," she said, her voice growing stronger, clearer. "I recorded our entire study session." Coach Thompson let out a short, incredulous laugh. "That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. Why on earth would you record someone helping you with homework?" Jada finally turned her attention to him, her gaze sharp and accusatory. "Because unlike some teachers, Marcus is actually good at explaining things, and I wanted to be able to re-watch it to study for the final exam. I use a screen recording app for all my online tutoring. It's just what I do." She looked back at the principal, her voice ringing with conviction. "I screen recorded Marcus helping me with biology homework yesterday. The video file has a timestamp. It shows the recording started at 3:47 p.m., the exact same day that this mysterious F was supposedly entered into the system. The silence in the room was now of a different quality. It was no longer heavy and oppressive. It was electric with anticipation. Jada, with trembling but determined hands, walked over to the principal's desk, cleared a space, and set down her laptop. She flipped open the screen and her fingers flew across the trackpad, clicking with rapid precision. The lawyer started to protest again. "Principal, this is hardly admissible." But Principal Davis held up a hand, silencing him without a word. Her eyes were fixed on the laptop screen. A moment later, the video player opened and Jada hit play. The screen was split into two windows. On one side was Jada's face, a study in focused confusion. On the other side was my own, patient and focused, a digital whiteboard open between us filled with my crude but accurate diagrams of the Krebs cycle. The audio crackled to life and my own voice filled the silent office. Okay, so don't think of it as glycolysis, my video self said. Just think of it as the setup act. Glucose is the star of the show, and glycolysis is just breaking it down into two smaller, more manageable pieces called pyruvate. The cell invests 2 ATP to get the party started, but it gets 4 back. So, what's the net profit? Jada's voice came through the speakers, hesitant but thinking. 2 ATP? Exactly, my voice on the recording said. And 2 NADH, which are like little rechargeable batteries the cell will use later, see? You know this stuff. I watched, mesmerized as the scene played out. I saw the faces of the others in the room, reflected faintly in the dark screen. The lawyer's mouth was slightly agape, his condescending smirk completely gone. Coach Thompson sat rigid in his chair, his knuckles white where he gripped the armrests, a thin film of sweat glistening on his upper lip. He looked like a man watching a bomb being defused, praying the wire cutters would slip. The video continued for another minute with my on-screen persona walking Jada through the electron transport chain. He even made a stupid joke about mitochondria being the powerhouse of the cell. Then, Jada's recorded voice said, "Okay, I think I get it now. You're a better teacher than Mr. Rodriguez." My video self laughed. "Just happy to help. You're going to ace this thing." Then, Jada did something that changed everything. On the screen, she picked up her laptop saying, "I'm gonna go grab a water. You want one?" As she turned, the webcam swung around, panning across the nearly empty library. For a split second, the camera captured the main reading area, and sitting there at a table by the history section, plain as day, was Coach Thompson. He was bent over his phone, his face illuminated by its glow. Jada's fingers shot out and paused the video, freezing the frame. And there, in the bottom right corner of the screen, was the damning, immutable evidence. Timestamp, 3:47 p.m. Jada looked up, her gaze now fixed on the coach. "The IT department can pull the network logs," she said, her voice as sharp as glass. "I'm willing to bet my full academic scholarship that they'll show my grade was changed from an A to an F at approximately 4:15 p.m. yesterday afternoon, less than 30 minutes after your coach was sitting right there watching me get a perfect tutorial on the very subject I supposedly failed." The frozen image of Coach Thompson staring at his phone hung in the air like a death sentence. The silence that followed was absolute, a vacuum where all the lies and accusations had been sucked away, leaving only the cold, hard truth on a 14-inch laptop screen. The lawyer was the first to speak, though his voice had lost all its silky confidence. He stammered, shuffling papers in his briefcase for no reason. This proves nothing. It's circumstantial. It's a coincidence." Principal Davis finally moved. She slowly, deliberately unlaced her fingers and placed her palms flat on the desk. She looked at the lawyer, and her voice was so cold it could have frozen boiling water. "A coincidence?" she repeated. "It proves that 30 minutes before Marcus's grade was fraudulently changed, he was demonstrating an expert-level understanding of the subject matter. It proves that you, Coach Thompson, were present in the same location at the same time. And it proves," she added, her eyes narrowing, "that I have more than enough reason to launch a full investigation that will start with a call to the district superintendent and a long, long conversation with Meister Rodriguez." She glanced at the elegant clock on her office wall. The championship game was still happening. Her gaze shifted from the coach's pale, terrified face to mine. "The tip-off is in 30 minutes. A surge of adrenaline, so powerful it made me dizzy, shot through my body. The world came rushing back in vivid color. She wasn't just talking about the time. She was making a ruling. "Coach Thompson," she said, her voice leaving no room for argument. "This benching is overturned, effective immediately. Marcus will be dressed and on the court for tip-off. His academic record will be corrected by morning. Whether you will still have a job on Monday is a topic for another day. Right now, your one and only priority is to win a state championship for this school using the team captain who earned his spot." She looked directly at me then, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of a smile in her eyes. "Go get your uniform, Marcus. You have a game to play." I stood up, my legs feeling shaky but strong. I looked at Coach Thompson. The hatred in his eyes was pure and undiluted. The fight wasn't over, but I was no longer watching from the sidelines. I was back in the game. There was no time to change. No time for anything but the raw, unfiltered adrenaline that was now coursing through me. I half jogged from the administrative building to the gym, the distant roar of the crowd growing louder with every step, calling to me. I didn't have my uniform, but I had the next best thing, a statement. I walked past the ticket takers, who were too busy dealing with the overflow crowd to notice me, and pushed through the main doors into the gymnasium. The wall of sound and heat hit me like a physical force. The air was thick with the smell of popcorn and anticipation. The bleachers were a vibrating sea of our school's blue and gold. 1,000 faces hyped up for a championship game. On the court, my teammates were going through their warm-up drills, but something was off. Their movements were sluggish. Their passes lacked their usual snap. Their energy muted and demoralized. They looked like a team that knew their heart had been ripped out. Then Jason, our shooting guard, saw me. His eyes went wide. He stopped dribbling. One by one, the others followed his gaze. Their expressions shifted from confusion to disbelief to a dawning, explosive hope. I wasn't wearing my #12 jersey. I was wearing my battle gear, a pair of crisp black and gold Jordan 1S, my official team hoodie, and strapped defiantly over the sleeve of my right arm, the captain's armband I had earned fair and square. The buzzer blared, signaling the end of warm-ups. As my teammates started jogging towards the sideline, Coach Thompson intercepted me before I could take 2 steps onto the hardwood. He moved fast, his face a thunderous mask of rage, and grabbed my arm, his fingers digging into my bicep. "What in the hell do you think you're doing, Williams?" he hissed, his voice a low, venomous whisper that was somehow more threatening than a shout. He was trying to handle this without causing a scene, trying to maintain some shred of authority. "You are not dressed. You are not on the official roster I submitted an hour ago. You are a spectator." His eyes, bloodshot and wild, burned into mine. "I told you not to make this harder than it had to be. Now get out of my gym before I call security and have you physically thrown out." I didn't try to pull my arm away. I just stood my ground, meeting his furious gaze with a calm I didn't know I possessed. The fear was gone, burned away by the injustice and the vindication from the principal's office. "This isn't your gym, coach," I said, my voice steady and clear, loud enough for the players closest to us to hear. "It belongs to the school, and Principal Davis already cleared me to play. You should check your messages." Just as he was about to retort, a high-pitched screech of microphone feedback echoed through the arena, silencing the pre-game chatter. Everyone, including a startled Coach Thompson, looked up towards the announcer's box. Then, a voice, amplified and utterly composed, filled the entire gymnasium. It was Principal Davis. "Good evening, Wolverines fans," she began, her tone calm and authoritative. "Just a brief announcement before the start of this exciting state championship game." A dramatic pause hung in the air, capturing the attention of every single person in the building. Due to the correction of an administrative error in the eligibility reporting, she continued, her choice of words both perfectly professional and a devastating public rebuke. "Marcus Williams will be participating in tonight's game." She didn't have to say anything else. She didn't need to mention the fraud or the lies. She had said enough. The student section, who had been an anxious, buzzing hive, went silent for a beat as they processed the news. Then, a single voice yelled my name, and it was followed by an explosion. The murmur of confusion turned into a roar of approval. Principal Davis finished her announcement as if nothing had happened. "Let's have a great fair game. Go Wolverines!" The roar from the crowd was deafening. Coach Thompson let go of my arm as if he'd been burned, his face a pale, horrified mask of public humiliation. His authority had been stripped from him in front of the entire school. He looked around wildly at the cheering students, at the confused but clapping parents, at me. "This is my team," he snapped, but his voice, meant to be a defiant roar, cracked halfway through, betraying his rage and impotence. The crowd didn't hear him. They had found a new focus. A chant began, starting in the heart of the student section and spreading like wildfire through the bleachers. "Marcus! Marcus! Marcus!" It was a tidal wave of sound, a resounding vote of confidence that washed over me and crashed down on the two people who deserved it most. I looked over at Tyler, who was standing at the free throw line, ostensibly practicing his final warm-up shots. He heard the chant. He saw me standing there, the rightful captain. He looked at his uncle's face, contorted with rage, and the weight of the entire situation seemed to land on his narrow shoulders. He dribbled twice, bounced the ball, and shot. The ball sailed right, clanging hard off the side of the rim. He got his own rebound, a nervous, fumbling motion, and tried again. This one was worse, an air ball that missed the rim by a foot. The crowd's chant grew louder. I walked past the coach, who stood frozen in place, and straight to the team bench. I was immediately swarmed by my teammates. Hands slapped my back, fists bumped my shoulder. "What happened, man? We thought you were sick." "Are you really playing?" they asked, their faces alight with a renewed fire. "It's a long story," I said, a grin spreading across my face for the first time all day. "I'll tell you later. Right now, let's go win this thing." The energy on the bench had completely transformed. The despair was gone, replaced by a fierce, focused intensity. I looked up at the massive scoreboard hanging over the center of the court. The bright red digits glowed, counting down the final minutes until the game began. 0 hours, 4 minutes, and 32 seconds. 4 minutes and 32 seconds. It wasn't just a countdown to the opening tip-off. It was my window. My time to get my head in the game, to forget the lawyer and the lies and the politics. All that mattered now was the 94 feet of hardwood in front of me. This was my chance to prove, with my actions and not my words, that the last 3 years of dedication, sweat, and sacrifice weren't going to be thrown away because of family politics. This was my time to show everyone who the real captain was. I spent the first 3.5 quarters on the bench, a storm of useless energy raging inside me. My street clothes felt like a straitjacket. Every possession was agony. I watched my teammates fight and claw for every single point against a disciplined, aggressive Northwood team. They played with heart, but they were playing without their floor general, and it showed. The offense was disjointed, hesitant. Every time Tyler touched the ball, the entire offensive rhythm seemed to collapse. The Northwood defenders sagged off him, practically daring him to shoot, which clogged the lane for everyone else. He'd driven recklessly into traffic twice, resulting in costly turnovers. He'd passed up wide-open shots only to throw the ball to a covered teammate. When he did shoot, it was a stiff, fearful motion, as if the ball weighed 100 pounds. The results were predictable. One lucky bank shot in the second quarter was his only field goal. He was 1 for 11. 1 for 11 in the biggest game of his life. And with every miss, every turnover, I could see the hope draining from my teammates' faces. Coach Thompson stood on the sideline, a statue of stubborn pride, refusing to even glance in my direction. The assistant coaches pleaded with him during timeouts, their whispers urgent and heated. But he just shook his head, his jaw set like concrete. Then, with just 12 seconds left on the clock, a Northwood guard hit a tough, contested jumper. The ball swished through the net. We were down by 1. Coach Thompson finally called our last timeout. 8 seconds left, one last chance. The moment the timeout was called, the simmering frustration in the stands boiled over. The polite applause and nervous cheers were gone, replaced by a single, unified demand that shook the gymnasium to its foundations. "Put Marcus in! Put Marcus in!" The roar was primal, a collective voice of thousands of people who could see the truth that one man refused to accept. My warm-up hoodie felt suffocatingly hot. The adrenaline pumping through my veins made everything feel surreal, like I was moving through water. The chaotic noise of the crowd faded into a dull, distant hum, and all I could hear was the frantic pounding of my own heart and the squeak of sneakers on the hardwood court. I couldn't sit there for a second longer. In that moment, the decision wasn't even a conscious thought. It was an instinct. I stood up from the bench, my legs steady, and walked with purpose past the huddle, past the coach, and straight to the scorer's table. I leaned over the table, my eyes locked on the court. "Williams, checking in," I said to the official scorer, a middle-aged woman who looked at me with a mixture of shock and profound sympathy. She picked up her pen, then hesitated, looking nervously towards our bench, towards the coach. She knew, as did everyone else in the gym, that I was forcing his hand. I wasn't asking for permission anymore. The referee, a tall, bald man with a no-nonsense demeanor, saw me standing at the table and blew a sharp tweet on his whistle to get our coach's attention. He jogged over. Coach Thompson, seeing me there, saw his authority being challenged in the most public way possible. He stormed towards the scorer's table, his face a blotchy, furious red. "He can't play!" he bellowed, pointing a trembling finger at me. "Get him away from the table. Look at him. He's not in uniform. He is not eligible to enter the game." He was shouting at the ref, but his words were for the crowd, for the administration, a final, desperate appeal to the rules he had so recently tried to manipulate. The referee listened patiently, his expression unchanging. He looked me up and down, taking in my team hoodie, the captain's armband, the blue and gold on my shoes. He then looked back at the apoplectic coach. "Coach," he said, his voice calm and firm, cutting through the tirade. "The league rulebook, Section 4, Paragraph 3, states that a player must be attired in official team colors to participate. His hoodie is official team apparel and his colors are correct. He is properly dressed according to the rules." He gestured towards me with his thumb. "He's eligible to play. Is he checking in or not?" The coach's face crumbled. His last line of defense, his last refuge in the rulebook, had been dismantled in front of everyone. He stood there, speechless, his argument obliterated by the very system he was hiding behind. While the coach was sputtering, trying to process his defeat, my eyes drifted to our team's huddle. And I saw him. Tyler. He wasn't listening to the frantic instructions from the assistant coach. He wasn't looking at the whiteboard. He had a towel draped over his head, but it couldn't hide the convulsive shaking of his shoulders. The weight of his father's ambition, the terrible performance, the deafening roar of the crowd chanting my name, it had all combined to utterly break him. He was just a kid, a pawn in his uncle's ugly game, and he was crumbling under a level of pressure he never should have been subjected to. I felt a pang of something, not anger, but a strange, hollow pity. I walked from the scorer's table to the edge of the huddle. The coach turned to glare at me, about to unleash another volley of abuse, but I spoke first. My voice was quiet, but it cut through the noise. "Coach," I said, loud enough for the referee and everyone in the huddle to hear, "your nephew's crying." Every head turned. They saw Tyler, who had pulled the towel from his head, his face streaked with tears as he sobbed, overwhelmed and humiliated. In that moment, he wasn't a rival. He was the living, breathing consequence of the coach's poisonous pride. Without a word, Tyler stood up, walked unsteadily to the far end of the bench, and collapsed, burying his face in his hands. He had taken himself out of the game. Checkmate. The coach had no one left to turn to. His grand scheme was in ruins. His chosen player was broken. The crowd was a unified voice of judgment against him. The law was on my side. He was utterly and completely beaten. He turned to me, and the look on his face was no longer just anger. It was a deep, corrosive hatred, the look of a petty king whose throne had been usurped. He snatched the clipboard from the assistant coach and shoved it hard into my chest. "Fine, Williams," he snarled, the word fine sounding like a curse. "You want the ball so bad? You want to be the hero? You got it. It's all on you now." He leaned in close, his voice dropping to a venomous whisper meant only for me, his last pathetic attempt to reclaim power. "But when you miss this shot, and you will miss it, I want you to remember that it was me. I was the one who gave you the chance to fail in front of absolutely everyone." It was a pathetic, transparent attempt to reframe his failure as my test, his defeat as some magnanimous gesture. He was trying to poison the moment, to plant a seed of doubt in my mind. I took the clipboard from his hands. I glanced down at the play he had drawn up. A messy, convoluted disaster. A play designed to confuse, not to succeed. With the back of my hand, I wiped the whiteboard clean. I looked up from the blank slate and met his hateful gaze one last time. The roar of the crowd, the flashing lights, the suffocating pressure, it all melted away, leaving just the two of us. Just me and the man who had tried to steal my dream. My voice was low, steady, and filled with the cold certainty of what was about to happen. "When I make it, I said. I want you to remember you're the one who tried to bench a champion. I didn't wait for a reply. I turned my back on him for good. Jason, Mark, Leo, Chris, with me, I yelled to my 4 chosen teammates. I jogged onto the court, and the sound that erupted from the crowd was a physical thing, a wave of pure belief that washed over me. All around the arena, hundreds of phone cameras flashed, their lights blinking in the dimness like a galaxy of stars being born all at once, a championship coronation already in progress. I took my spot, clapping my hands, waiting for the inbound. 8 seconds. The rest of my life started now. The referee handed me the ball on the sideline. The clock glowed with 8 perfect red seconds. The entire gym was on its feet, a roaring ocean of sound and light and hope. Northwood's defense was set to deny me the ball, their best defender shadowing me with an intensity that was suffocating. I locked eyes with Jason. We didn't need a clipboard or a coach. We had 1,000 hours on the blacktop, a chemistry forged in summer heat and pickup games. I slapped the ball, the signal. I inbounded it to him and took off, not towards the basket but away from it, a decoy pulling my defender along for the ride. 2 of my teammates set a perfect staggered screen near the free throw line. My defender, fighting to stay with me, got tangled up in the chaos. Jason fired a pass to Leo on the wing, who, without a moment's hesitation, relayed it to me as I curled hard around the top of the key, catching the ball in perfect rhythm. The clock read 3.2 seconds. Northwood's big center, a giant of a kid who had dominated the paint all night, switched onto me. A mismatch. He was too slow. I gave a hard jab step to my left. He bit, shifting his weight for just a fraction of a second. It was all I needed. I rose up, elevating off the hardwood, my body feeling strangely light. In that suspended moment, the roar of the crowd, the shouts of the players, the frantic ticking of the clock, it all went silent. There was only me, the ball, and the basket. I saw the bright orange rim, a perfect circle waiting for me. I felt the familiar grain of the leather on my fingertips. The release was muscle memory, a fluid, automatic motion I had practiced until it was as natural as breathing. The shot felt perfect. The backspin was tight. The arc was true. The final buzzer shrieked while the ball was still hanging in the air, a perfect golden sphere against the bright lights of the gym. Then came the sound. Not the harsh clang of iron, but the soft, clean, beautiful swish of the net. Game over. The silence was shattered by a sonic boom of a roar. I was mobbed, buried under a pile of my joyous, screaming teammates, the weight of their bodies a glorious, crushing affirmation of everything we had just accomplished. The roar of that crowd carried me for 6 months, all the way to Durham, North Carolina, and the hallowed courts of Duke University. The first time I pulled that iconic blue and white jersey over my head, I thought about the crumpled hoodie I wore in the championship. It turned out that the recruiters and coaches who called me weren't just interested in my points per game average. The #Benchgate story had gone viral. They saw the game tape, but they also read the articles about the kid who refused to back down, who fought for his team and his integrity. They saw character. And here, playing at a level I had only dreamed of, I finally felt like I was where I belonged. Back home, the fallout from that night was swift. The school board's investigation, armed with Jada's time-stamped video and a full confession from a terrified Mr. Rodriguez, was merciless. Coach Thompson wasn't just fired. He was publicly censured for gross ethical violations and abuse of authority. He was reassigned, a punishment worse than termination for a man of his ego. He now teaches physical education and coaches the 7th grade boys basketball team at a middle school on the other side of the county. I heard Tyler quit the team the very next day. A few months later, I saw a picture of him online, holding a first-place trophy with a genuine, unforced smile. He'd joined the debate team. His sharp, argumentative nature, which had always been a source of conflict, had finally found a productive home. He was winning, but on his own terms, finally free from his uncle's suffocating ambition. And Jada? She became a local celebrity. A tech blog wrote a feature on the girl who coded a coup, and her story went wider than any of ours. MIT didn't just honor her full-ride scholarship, they fast-tracked her into a paid undergraduate research position. The simple screen recording app she used to study is now, with university funding, being developed as a district-wide academic transparency tool for students. She didn't just save my career, she started her own and changed the system for everyone else. Street clothes or not, champions always find a way to play.